thought we should have a conversation because so oftentimes when we talk to clients, we find that they don't know how to stop the sieve. The constant churn of employees coming and going, getting those right fit employees and keeping them to stop that churn. So let's talk about it.
This is one of the areas that is so manageable. It's really easy to, once you recognize this is something you have complete control over, because it feels like you're out of control and you're just siphoning money off as the turnover continues to grow. One client that we talked with talked about how they were able to reduce the amount of turnover down to, from industry standard of 100% within retail, down to like 8% because they were intentional about how they were bringing people on board and getting them indoctrinated into what needed to be learned for them to be effective with customers. But let's talk about the numbers.
Yeah.
We call this a turnover tax because when people are not intentional about it and turnover continues to churn, as you said, it's bleeding off money. Every company should sit down and calculate their own turnover tax, and that includes soft costs and hard costs, and the amount of time that you spend on rehiring, retraining, and getting somebody up to their standard turnover tax is something that can be huge within an organization. So here's the secret sauce.
I was going to say, can I interrupt you for a moment, and can we dig a little deeper on what are the soft and hard costs to make sure people truly understand what we mean by turnover tax?
Yeah, and so the hard costs would be like when you're hiring somebody to do recruiting for you, if you've got background checks, if you have to hire temps for the stopgap. Soft costs. Overtime, yeah, absolutely, for the people making up the difference. Soft costs are the amount of time it takes to interview all of these people, create the questions, keep track of everything, schedule interviews, bring people in, have the discussions, and it takes a long time. Some organizations, it can take 90 days to hire somebody, especially somebody at the C-suite level. So there's a lot of time that goes into it, and your turnover tax raises and lowers based on the position. But one thing we discovered was that if you allow the low-level positions to just come and go, those positions bleed off money at a rate that you wouldn't expect. So what was the cost that we saw that
one of the clients we looked at recently said that they calculated their turnover tax and it was $13,000 per hire. And so when they looked at their churn, because they had the attitude of, it's okay, we have 90 days to get someone on board and know that we have 90 days to figure out if they work. And if they don't, we can cut ties with them, which is true. It's not a false belief, it's true. And because they had that attitude, it was an unintended consequence that they did have a high level of turnover. They were hiring any warm body that could do these more menial tasks. And it was costing $13,000 a person. And it came to, wasn't it like $1 million a year?
Yeah.
It was costing their organization.
Yeah. And that was primarily at the very lowest level within their organization. And when we encouraged them to look at that turnover, they realized they had 75 to 80% turnover in their lowest level within the organization, and that it was costing them $1 million.
Yeah.
So how important that is.
And I love that particular client because one of the things we sat down with them is we pulled together the operations team, and instead of problem solving, we said, describe your ideal employee, your ideal candidate, and that your best hire. Describe them. What did they look like? What characteristics did they come in having? What skills did they come in having? Tell me how they learned. How did you teach them? We even used like a little gingerbread man just to kind of paint around the gingerbread man the things they came to the table with, and the things how they learned. We described that process and helped them to identify the best experience.
And what I loved about that exercise with them was it got all of the people involved in hiring, everybody within that division taking a look and going, how did you, if you had a perfect day for a first day of somebody coming on board, what would that day look like? And they were able to look at not only how to attract, but how to retain and how to onboard them successfully. And we call it awesome onboarding because it's like the secret sauce. If you can get people in, especially when you get the whole division involved in what do they need to know? What do they need to learn? How do they need to, what skills do they need to have in order to be successful within the first 30 days? You've got something really awesome that helps people stay and be successful.
Yeah, and I remember with that particular engagement, we really sat down and identified what is the best onboarding experience you had, and then what is it that prevents you from having that. Right. And we made a few tweaks into their onboarding and sat down with the mid-level managers who were doing it and the recruiter who's actually recruiting the candidates and the trainer who's doing the onboarding for the organization, and identified what do you want them to be taught by HR, what do you want them to be taught by the director on the first 12 to 24 hours, 48 hours, what do you want to be taught over the first few weeks or months by peers or the mid-level managers, and who's going to be responsible for that, and help them to come up with a checklist, a strategy for who's doing what and when, and a way for them to communicate that, and for the employee to acknowledge, I did learn this, and it was a system that
it was a great system, and they developed it. We just kind of facilitated that. And the beauty of that is there is such a connection and a correlation between engaging people immediately and getting that, they call it a honeymoon phase. We used to call it a 90-day honeymoon, as you referred to a minute ago. That's shortened now to about a 30-day amount of time in which you figure out whether you're going to stay or go, and you as an employer decide whether you're going to keep or let them go. Well, that's shortened over time, and people really are making those decisions way early on, within the first few days, maybe within the first few hours. What we did with that group was, as we helped them understand that, they identified how they could tweak one little thing, and that was just greet somebody, put them with a person, buddy them up, and connect them. And we've already seen results just within a few months.
I remember one of the most powerful ahas we had with that engagement was they had expressed that one of their points of failure that occurs was on day 3. They spend 2 days with HR. Day 3 is the day they come to the actual department. And it's always a problem, they said, because they come at 7 a.m. when their shift normally starts, and the department is unable to talk to them until 9, because from 7 to 9 there were mission critical tasks that the entire department was taking care of, because they were in a retail environment and they were having to prep for the day. And they literally had a story that they told us about. They have video footage of a new hire walking out the side door and never coming back because no one talked to them for an hour and a half. So we talked about that. And remember the aha?
It was, why don't we let that person come in at 9 after we finish prepping the trucks? And
on day 3.
On day 3. It was an aha. It was like a light bulb went off. The beauty of it was that they were able to solve that problem once they had a perspective and they understood the data and the importance of making that first connection.
Yeah, and that one, I just got chills thinking about it, because that one aha moment was able to completely change the spirit and the intentionality.
Yes.
They wanted them to be engaged, they
Yes.
wanted them to be greeted, and for 2 hours they weren't going to be able to focus on that employee. And so they made that one switch. Good news, on day 3 you get to sleep in and you don't need to be in until 9 o'clock, but be ready to roll at 9. And then now
it was easy.
It was very easy.
Yeah,
very easy. And so wouldn't you say that if you do focus on the turnover tax, awesome onboarding, you really can change results?
You can change the culture because people feel engaged. You can increase retention, and studies have showed that when you feel engaged and you're onboarded consistently in a consistent manner, you can increase retention by up to 50%, and we know you increase job satisfaction by up to 70%.
That's awesome. You were using a statistic the other day about using the word sad. Jobs in a survey, employees were saying that they were sad, and what was the other thing they were saying?
It was a Gallup poll, the 2022 Global Workforce Poll report on global workforce engagement, and there was evidence that the 50% of the people who work within organizations feel worried. 20% reported feeling unhappy, and actually the word they used was sad. And so when we know that people are coming feeling that way within the organization, there's some really minor things that we can do as leaders to help engage them, help them feel like there's a place for them where they belong and where they can make a difference and contribute to the organization's success.
And it all starts with onboarding.
It all starts with onboarding.